Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we're going to discuss a very big and arguably pretty horrible topic. We're going to talk about the subject, quite simply, of is QNAP NAS still safe? Ransomware, it's been around for a long time. I think most of us, we know what it is, and we're obviously going to talk in this video about what ransomware is to a degree, but ultimately, I think we can all kind of see that QNAP has been hit by ransomware attacks more than anyone else. It doesn't just feel that way, but the evidence, QRX, QLocker, WannaCry, these things seem to be happening over and over again, which leads a lot of people, both current buyers and potential buyers of QNAP products, wondering, is the brand still safe? And that's what today's video is going to be about. We're going to look at everything that's happened. We're going to discuss kind of the responsibilities of the brand. We're going to talk about the responsibilities of, us, the people that actually have these products. Where does the line stop from the brand? And ultimately, what are our expectations? And at the end of this, hopefully make a decision, vague or not. Let's be honest, it's going to be grey. There's not going to be a black or white question there, whether we think QNAP NAS is still safe to buy. This is Eddie, of course, on screen. He is to my, I believe that side there. Again, we've got the cameras all locked up. He's very, very far away. Obviously, here we are on Zoom. We don't agree on everything so far, and I know what you're thinking. Are you ever going to let this guy speak? And I will. Me and Eddie don't really agree on all of the stuff that's going on. We generally haven't in the past, hence this video. So a lot of you are probably going to take away from this video kind of agreeing with my points, his points, on neither of our points. But Eddie, so straight away, how do you feel about everything that's gone on so far with QNAP NAS and the ransomware attacks? I mean, you're a QNAP and a Synology NAS owner, so how are you feeling about this as an existing hardware owner?
Yeah, it is actually very worrying, especially when you see these attacks happening so often. So you might actually lose all your confidence in their products. But at the same time, it also almost like feel like someone is like trying to punish QNAP, trying to make some changes in their way of developing their software, which is also a good thing. But it's not always as bad as it looks. So if you know what you're doing, you can keep your things safe. You can configure your NAS, and it will be less likely that someone would actually get into your NAS and do terrible things like ransomware and asking for money.
But sorry to interject there. So straight away, I mean, that's one of the earliest things that I think we disagree on about, and that's kind of the skill set of the average user. Because, I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. When we talk about these products here around us, there is kind of this feeling that these products can be utilized by the everyman. And I think that is still true. I think a lot of these products can still be used by the everyman. And this isn't just QNAP I'm talking about here. But it's the security aspect. I don't think anyone has really made firewalls, port forwarding, the difference between network and internet connectivity and the layers there in between. I just don't think it's possible to make that user friendly, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, if the argument that if a person knows what they are doing, it's whether someone who's buying a network attached storage device should have done a 6-week course, should have taken an online Open University course, even a short, a brief one, to know about this kind of stuff, so that they can access their data remotely. I mean, what's your network background generally?
I think it's good. I know a few bits, but I think at this point, this situation, I think NAS brands have actually messed up a little bit, because they have a really secure way of connecting. They're on like a VPN server, which they call Quick Connect or Cloud ID, I think, on a QNAP.
My QNAP
which means by default everything would be blocked. No one could come into your NAS, and you have this like private tunnel to their VPN server, to the proxy server, which would be the only route you could get into your NAS. But just because there are so many people connecting to it, is not the fastest thing out there. So all these NAS brands were actually saying like, oh, if you want to speed up your data transfer speeds and fluidity and user experience, set up port forwarding. We're going to make it so easy for you. So look, just click enable this, and it's going to go connect to your router and enable all these ports and stuff like that. And yeah, and speed is really great, but you shouldn't be doing that if you are a really proper beginner. If you want to just connect your hard drive to your router, you shouldn't be doing like anything automated like that. So I think the NAS brands they should take the blame as well.
Absolutely, but we're not talking about today all the NAS brands, and of course we will talk about the perception of NAS, but mainly let's talk about QNAP there and this idea of like regular day-to-day users enabling that remote access. Now, you're right, people who don't know what they're playing with port forwarding and enabling those settings shouldn't really be playing with them, but at the same time, when you do log in to the QNAP's own remote access area, that My QNAP Cloud, there are lots of options on there, some of which are very, very helpful, like the Let's Encrypt SSL certificate area there. But there's other ones like, let's face it, quite of a hot topic here during this ransomware stuff, that enabling UPnP router pass-through there to enable a lot of those ports to be accessible. And I don't like the idea that that's there for anyone to utilize. Also, when you do go into My QNAP Cloud, a lot of those options are not available until you create a My QNAP Cloud Connect account. So you've already got to go through that process of enabling, utilizing their own, site, their own domain to pass through and access the NAS. But those other options, they're not really. There's not enough walls between me and being able to play with those settings. It seems to be incredibly, cool, use these features, they're right here, it's a click of a button. Nice. And I'm not sure that that should be the case. There should be a door on this system that when I log into it, there's a door that says I am an expert, and there's a door there, and there's going to be a lot of computer game comparisons today, I'm really sorry. But when a computer game loads up and it says, what difficulty level do you want? I kind of want that on this system to exist, because I think a lot of users who, they have all this customization. It's one of the main reasons people buy QNAP NAS, but there's too many variables that are way too easy for me to play with if I don't have the skill set to know what I'm doing, and not enough warning to what can happen if these are mistreated. You're right, there is the way of using QNAP's own pathway there, but there's also very easy methods and openings for me to be able to customize and play with them. What would you say to that?
I think you're right about that because normally I would suggest QNAP and other brands to make their configuration like default in a way that everything is blocked, all doors are closed. But I know why they are opening those doors already beforehand, because when people would buy their NAS and plug it in, they would be calling their support and saying like, this is not working, that is not working. So they decided like, okay, let's open a few doors already. So when they plug the NAS in, it already works, and they're not going to come to us asking about how to connect to your NAS and how to do this and why these apps are not working. So they probably consciously open a few doors open already, which is not great. But in general, most of those are closed anyway. And if you are not enabling port forwarding or EPnP, it should be relatively safe already at that point.
I mean, we will talk a little bit later on about some of the stuff with QLocker and the back door that was found in one of those applications. We'll talk about that later on. But let's move slightly towards the perception of QNAP there. I mean, if you go through all of and I know you have the Bleeper Computer articles, the forums, our own, the comments in our video, an article, self-plug, and QNAP's own forum, which I believe at the time of recording this video, I think is on 38, maybe 35 pages, something like that, of the support forum regarding Deadbolt. You get a very consistent feeling of how people feel. And again, I've made notes. The feelings that you get, not only from that article, but the general consensus of QNAP users is, one, that the brand seems to bring a lot of their software and services to market very quickly, often ahead of everyone else. But, and I hate to use this expression, it could have used a little bit more time in the oven sometimes, getting a lot more cyber investigation into it, that kind of stuff. And a lot of the defaults are not anywhere near randomized as they should be. And I know obviously randomization isn't ideal, but in the same way when you create a password with a website, I want a randomized password, a lot of these settings can be randomized, can select a port without relying on a handful of setting presets moving forward, because these settings are only going to apply to one machine. Second thing, and this is something I talked about before, QNAP has a feeling of being a much more reactive brand rather than proactive brand. They release a lot of this software stuff, which is good, which lends towards the proactivity, but they're very reactive to these issues when they happen. And we are, of course, going to talk about that forced update they did at the end of last week. But you can't help but feel when you're dealing with a brand that they are kind of fixing things as they go. A lot of these products are released to market, and they're thinking, oh, we can sort that out down the line. Let's stress test it live. Even there seems to be a lot more betas, and they seem to run a lot shorter. Look at QTS 5, the beta. That did run for a little longer than I thought it might, but it was still nowhere near as long as a lot of other high-end, arguable operating systems do run. And I think the frequency of those patches is indicative of that. And again, we will talk about patches. And my last notes there, the QNAP's dialogue with end users, it feels slightly abrupt sometimes when you read a lot of the customer support back and forths, even with trained IT professionals and, dare I say, numpties off the street. That dialogue is found wanting by a lot of users. Now, this again is just general feedback from what we've seen online, and probably the biggest one, and this is kind of, you could spin this as a positive, really. QNAP NASs are still held as great offline systems, which again a lot of people didn't buy it for, but they still have a great reputation as an offline system. It's just they're really taking a pounding on this with regards to remote access, how many doors are being left open and how much people can trust their data to be inside it. I mean, for you, is there any other perceptions you think I've missed there in terms of how QNAP is perceived both by current users and potential users?
Yeah, there was lots of things to unwrap. We could talk about all those subjects for a long time. But we shouldn't forget that this is actually the beauty of QNAP as a brand, that they are so innovative. There's no other brand which come up with like these new features. Yes, they are rushing things very, like, sometimes too fast without checking is this going to work or not. But they're having some sort of like attitude in the life that they're just going to shoot their R10 aim and then see where it goes, rather than like do all this planning and then shooting it. You never create anything good out of this anyway. So sometimes it is better to go through the mistakes and stuff. This way you can often create a better product out there. But that's very true that for simple home user, as someone who is having this NAS for first time in their life, QNAP is not going to be the option there, because if you want to experiment with these things, you don't want to put your sensitive data on such system, unless you do your homework and you know what you're doing, and you close, you switch on the wall and you don't let anyone into your private network. Then you're fine. Yes, you can use the NAS locally, but you can also use it externally, accessing remotely. Just make sure you close all of the doors and just say like, okay, these IPs, these countries, or those tunnels, you are allowed to come into my home network. Because this is not just about the QNAP, because the fact that someone broken into QNAP, that means there are vulnerabilities in their network in general. They might break into their Google Homes and their TVs and their other IoT devices in the home. If they manage to get into QNAP, there's even bigger threat out there than they think. Someone might be recording them. So I think, you shouldn't forget that QNAP is innovative. There's no other brand who is creating so many features in so adjustable way that you just need to make sure that you keep things safe. And for first-time users, it might be very difficult to achieve.
I do agree with you. I mean, again, with regards, I agree for most of it. They have released a lot of things that are just not available anywhere else, and a lot of that does come from throwing as much as they can out there to see what will succeed. But I think they could do a much better job of alerting people that their sensitive data is built on slightly rickety strats, and I think that for me is a bit of an issue there.
Exactly, because if you think about it, if they chose to open like those few doors and leave them open, then I think deep inside they think that those people who are buying their products, they know their stuff, they know how to configure things. So with that mindset, they could as well just disable every single thing on their QNAP. Because if they think that people are IT sort of literate when they buy QNAP NASs, they'll figure their way out how to open few things, those ports, and if they need to. But by default, everything should be just closed down. And yes, it will be annoying for newcomers, for new users, but at least it will be properly safe.
I think you touch on an interesting point there about, again, going back to perception, because when I talked about the perception that I'd garnered from reading the forums and like general stuff of QNAP's reputation by that user base, at the same time, we as buyers, people that buy or have bought or are considering buying a QNAP, I think we do have to be a little honest with ourselves about some bits. First and foremost, very few people, I think, are buying a QNAP NAS for the software. The software is a delightful bonus a lot of the time. I think a lot of the AI stuff that they've been doing is really, really, really interesting. I think a lot of the file management stuff in the background is exceptionally good. I think a lot of people that buy the NAS are buying it for the storage. Maybe they're using it, again, as iSCSI targets, so they can use their own proprietary stuff. They're using it for the surveillance there as well. But I think most people that are buying a QNAP are buying it for three reasons. They're buying it, one, for the hardware and the power. You know, the old comparisons of Synology versus QNAP, of course, you know, you go to QNAP for your hardware, you go to Synology for your software. And the hardware on the QNAP, as you say, incredibly innovative, but also based on the price point, fantastic within the NAS industry. Second thing, of course, once again, massively touched on by you, is flexibility. People are buying these solutions because they are so goddamn customizable. They're incredibly flexible in the file structure. Again, I've touched on this in other videos before. With the QNAP brand, you get the vibe internally that when you are putting your data onto it, it's effectively going, how would you like to access your data? And then you set it up and then it will allow you to access the data in that way. Whereas a lot of other brands, and again, I'm going to mention Synology again, have a tendency, because of that closed system, or comparatively closed system structure, have a model where they go, here is your data. You must put it in these locations in this way, because they've got that more rigid structure that you're talking about there. And the third thing, of course, people buy QNAP NAS is for that third-party support. There's a lot more ways in which you can integrate a QNAP NAS into your third-party software than you can with a Synology. And again, I'm going to keep referring to Synology there, but in some ways you can refer to TrueNAS even, and you can refer to a lot of the other lesser NAS brands in terms of market share, your TerraMasters and your Acer store. But people that buy these QNAP NAS solutions, they must know in their heart of hearts that they are buying it for that hardware. They're buying it for the flexibility and the customization. And they're buying it for the suitability and compatibility with their proprietary and ideal software. And I think the minute they become reliant on the QNAP software and then they start berating it, I think sometimes there's a grey area there that a lot of people won't acknowledge, you know? Like, a lot of the time, and I'll get onto comparisons later on in terms of software. And this leads us neatly onto QNAP's rather swift and some might argue heavy-handed reaction to a lot of the devices being infected by the most recent ransomware. You know, when the numbers were creeping into the thousands, they, of course, went ahead with their, I'm going to use a word that I saw in a news report, controversial. I'm not sure about controversial being strong enough. Forced update. Eddie, over to you. The forced update.
The forced update, that was something they messed up a little bit, because on the article you wrote, actually, you made a good point that they should have warned people at least a few days in advance. They're saying like, okay, this is people are not listening to our security advice to update the NAS and stuff like that. We need to take an action on our behalf. So they could have sent out the email or whatever means they have, saying like in 3 days there will be update coming out. And even then, when the update comes out, you still can't rely that the message has reached a right person who is in charge in IT and stuff like that. So you still can't force the update. At that point, step 2 is supposed to be like, okay, there's going to be update coming through. If you don't opt out from this automatic update, is going to take place. So at least they have an option that they have like a pop-up on the screen saying like, if you will not click cancel here in 3 days, it's going to be doing auto update, because this is something they could have achieved.
Then it's choice, yeah.
And because what has happened now, there are so many people who do take their security as religion, and they have set up everything so securely, and that they don't care about these ransomware attacks because they feel safe. But just because the forced update came through, they might be running virtual machines and web servers and
Which
stuff
they
like
did.
that, which means that update was happening and forcefully rebooting the system, because there's no other way how to apply a patch. You need to reboot. So the data could be lost, not because of ransomware. No, QNAP might have actually caused some companies to lose their data with their forced update.
Also, yeah, a lot of people that were running the decryption who had actually paid a Deadbolt group and were in the midst of recovery, and this restarted their system. I think a lot of users who keep a lot of their higher security tiers out there were not overly chuffed about the idea of the brand being able to remote control straight away and force an update. It was a level of brand control that doesn't sit well with some people. So again, I think it was, obviously they made it clear this, they did this out of necessity, but it seems a little bit murky there. I'm not too sure about
the idea was good, but it was
poor execution, terrible execution. I mean, again, it's a comparison I've made so many times. And again, I'm sorry if it's trite. I'm sorry everyone that's watching this. But if when you look at consoles, yes, they are closed systems, so this works. But, your games, your online platform, that sort of thing, playing online, the minute you're trying to do anything with these games, which have online components, or a system that's has an online connection, if you don't install the latest update to the day, not subversions but full versions, the system goes, nope, no remote access for you. And I think a lot of users could benefit from that at setup, because a lot of people, I mean, let's be realistic. I am sure there are some devices, hell, I'm sure there are a couple of devices in this room which have got a few updates and firmware patches that I've not installed, either through personal management of them and logging into them and not setting them as automatic by default, or simply, let's look at Windows 11, that I am slightly sticky about the idea of moving on to a new version of something. Even Windows updates, I can be slightly, and look at Mac users as well, that thing at the top right of the screen that's shouting at them, remind me tomorrow, remind me tomorrow, remind me tomorrow. We're well aware of this cycle of things. So sometimes people do need a kick up the bum. This was not the way to deliver that kick up the bum. Okay? And I think, looking at my notes there, when we look at the architecture of updates, I don't think any NAS brand, with the exception of incredibly closed ones, like the Amber down there, I think very few NAS systems have forced updates. Some brands probably could have benefited from it, like the WD platform, which is a huge target, who has a huge target audience of novice users, and devices like the one I pointed out down there, these again are designed to be incredibly user-friendly. They can do 2 or 3 things. Therefore, the updates aren't really going to wrecking ball anything. So, with the QNAP platform having that forced update and the way they exchange it, I'm not saying it did more damage than the ransomware. That's ridiculous. Obviously, the ransomware was horrendous. But it's the idea that this kind of, it started a new fire over here of people going, wait, they can do that? That's not cool. Which is a worry. And again, firmware updates, they shouldn't be automatic. I don't think they should be automatic. I think there should be a louder option. And that door system that I talked about, look at your Amazon Fire TVs, your Apple TVs, all of these devices. If you don't install the latest firmware update, they not work. You can't access. They're closed systems that don't allow you to install lots of different applications. You can only really install verified and certified applications. There are workarounds, but the system makes it clear. If you go down this route, if you enable uncertified, unsupported third-party applications, you do it at your own risk, and it makes it very loud about that. So QNAP being the brand that people buy for that flexibility and that customization, it makes it very hard to gel in this infrastructure of flexibility and customization and freedom of use, and also creating that closed architecture that we're talking about here. So again, they could have done that better, but one could also argue, how the hell could they have done that at all?
Yeah, because when there was a QLocker going on, I think we were talking about this, that there should be forced updates. I think we were talking on YouTube about this, and I think they took it too serious, this option. So they thought, well, yeah, that's an option. Let's do something about it. And so they created this thing.
We can see why they did it. It's just, again, if they've considered this option before, and for want of a better word, they've always had this power to do that, they could have done this in a much better way before now. And that hasn't sat well with a lot of people. But let's move forward from this, because this lends us very well to probably the most divisive point in all of the ransomware attacks and all of the system, basically data loss. Let's be realistic, because this comes down to the responsibility of the brand and the responsibility of the end user. We've talked a lot in this video so far, this long video. I know I'm drinking my coffee. I hope you guys at home are having a good coffee. But we've talked a lot about the responsibility of the end user and their network configuration, the responsibility of their router and the settings and the ports and stuff like that. But a lot of people who have lost a lot of data in this most recent ransomware attack and previous ransomware attacks hold QNAP accountable for the loss of that data. And this is an incredibly sticky point here, isn't it? I mean, where does the brand's responsibility end? Because I have my feelings on it, but before I say mine, over to you, Eddie. What's the brand's responsibility as far as you're concerned?
I think they are not responsible. I wouldn't say they're responsible, because the same like with Windows as well. There's like viruses coming out every day, and you need to do updates to keep your data safe. But it's out of their control. You can't create software which is 100% safe. It's never going to happen. So there've been holes like in big companies like Apple and Android devices, and every single company have had issues like that. But I don't think so anyone was losing a court case because of that, because it's out of control. It's like, suing God or something because there was a storm and, and you didn't do planning. But
it kind of comes down to due diligence then, doesn't it? It's about the brand saying, we've done everything we possibly could. Due diligence. That whole, we've released a firmware update, someone found a vulnerability, we've released a firmware update, and then the cycle goes round and round until the end of time. And it's, if people don't opt in to that, but that still doesn't mean it's 100% foolproof, as you say. Even if you opt in to that merry-go-round and update every single time, that doesn't mean you're 100% bullet. I think everyone, if you had a VPN server running through the most aggressive setup there on your router, if you're using, some of these higher end pfSense kind of firewall extreme situations there, all it does is lessen. You are 99.9% protected, like a lot of these sprays.
Exactly, because at the same time, then QNAP should take Linux, if it was a company, to court, because QNAP runs on Linux operating system, same like other things. All the apps you see, they are built on top of something else. So every time there is insecurity in their software, they need to wait for them to create their patch so they can patch their system, because like layer upon layer, it's like starts from like your BIOS, your Linux operating system, QNAP operating system, then there's like PHP or whatever background like tools you're using, which you use your apps for, like video station and other things. It's like it's layer upon layer. So if something happens down at the bottom, you need to wait, till you get to the top when all the fixes are applied. You can't just there's nothing QNAP can do about it. There are some problems in the part, like the lower levels.
But when we talk about the like what their responsibility is, again, this is purely.
I think there was a little bit of negligence, because people were really upset. They took them like almost a month to resolve this, because I think it's quite often that they are not actually publicizing straight, where they keep this quiet at the start, and then when they figure out what it is, like a week later, then they're making it public and ask, oh yeah, there is a thing, because there are too many people shouting already. And it sometimes takes so slow to resolve the things, because there was on the blog post as well, you mentioned that he submitted a ticket, they didn't respond to him, they responded poorly, and then he had to chase them and stuff like that. So it's really laid back attitude when you need to chase a brand about something, so that can really annoy people.
You make a good point now, just going on a slight tangent there with regards to the system, the brand and their communication there about when these things happen, because and I've talked about this in the past as well. Again, sorry for the repetition, everyone, but a lot of the time, brands will use the argument, and not use. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but it's a very commonly held position that when a vulnerability is found, the brand will not make it too loud early doors. The reason being that the minute they go too loud, the people that are doing the attack will ramp up what they're doing because they think, oh, it's close to midnight. We've got to try and get as much out of this as we can because we've been found out. Now, that argument, there is some merit to it. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough merit when it comes to people's personal data. And the alternative, of course, is they then update their security advisory pages. QNAP have got one, Synology have got one, Acer Store have got one, WD have got one, blah, 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 blah. You can go as far as a lot of the devices in your home that are moderately high profile, they've got security advisory pages. And again, I go back to Apple TV, I talk about Fire Stick. Most brands have security advisory pages, which is their due diligence, once again, of going, these are the holes that people have found, these are the ones we fixed, these are the ones we're investigating, these are the ones that aren't. And during those pages, there's not enough sharing of the contents of those pages. There's not enough. That needs to be louder, those pages. And again, publish like promotion here. We do have that page that we have on NAS Compares, which has all of those different security advisories that we crawl daily or hourly. You built it, I didn't. And it lets people know that what the things that are added and their status. We made that because, frankly, in the inquiry section, we got a bit tired of telling people to go to the relevant security advisory. We created that page so it would all be in one page. You dump your email in, and then you get notified when there's an update on it. We shouldn't have to do that. And I'm talking about the NAS industry as a whole there. That should be louder than it is right now. But going back to it, when it comes to a lot of users and their responsibilities to their data, and where QNAP's responsibility ends, and again, once again, this is my opinion, this is my notes here on the background there, they've got a responsibility to store the data. I think you'd agree with that. They have a responsibility that if I put data on a QNAP NAS, that it lives there. Obviously, they recommend hard drives, they recommend RAID configurations, it's all recommendation. But the idea is that it stores data, I can access the data, and if they say it can do a thing, that it will do the thing they say it can do. At that point, I think their responsibility on the device, legally, socially, whatever way you want to describe it, I hate seagulls, I hope you can hear that through there, their responsibility then at that point becomes an incredible grey area, such as remote access. They provide the ability to access the data remotely, as you say, utilizing a remote access domain service, using the QNAP Cloud service there. They've provided that. They advertise it there. They also give people the ability to do it another way. But whether they should and how they deliver that is a different question. But I think at that point, the responsibility of the brand, again, legally or socially, kind of ends. And I think a lot of users have had a lot of difficulty differentiating storing and accessing data and the idea of backups. Because people that have lost data in this, a lot, if you go through the forums and all of the comments there, and I know I'm standing on my soapbox here a little bit, but they've kind of been told by lots of people afterwards, why didn't you have a backup? Or people will put a comment on there and say, I know I should have had a backup. That you can't, that one. Okay, you can't. It's 2022. You can't. It's not allowed. You've got to have a backup. It's loud enough that if you're putting all that data in one place and you delete the items off your phone or your laptop to make some space, it's all right. They're backed up on the NAS. It's not a backup. It's not. And it's not up to the brand to make that loud. They shouldn't have to advertise that. If I'm watching a car advert, and by the way, all car adverts are boring. There, I said it. But car adverts, they'll go, this is the new, I don't know, a Honda. There's a new Honda driving. Oh, there it is. Someone's on the bonnet. There's no other cars on the road. Funny that. But there's cars driving around and it's great. It's wonderful. It's a lifestyle. It's advertising it. No car advert in the last 20, 30 years ends at the bottom of the screen going, by the way, you need to have a driving license. They don't. They don't say that because you know you're going to need a driver. You know you have to have a certain skill set. And in this case, luckily, it's certified. And I think that's a big problem here. That idea of what people should know. Yes, QNAP should draw the lines louder and clearer, but I don't think that people should be able to colour in those lines themselves these days a little bit. Again, I'm going to stop talking now because I've been shouting at you and getting annoyed there for a second. But, I mean, what do you think of that, Ed?
I think it's very true. Exactly that car analogy. I think
it's a poor simile at best. It's a poor simile at best, but yeah.
Exactly, but at the same time, QNAP and other brands, they are doing more than they're supposed to, because all of these attacks happening, they are actually improving their car. Same like having just simple Honda. They are building Tesla out of Honda because of all these things. So they're making that car bulletproof or whatever, Spiegel proof, and and all other things. And this artificial intelligence. Same happens with NASs. More attacks are happening, more secure it's actually getting, and more functionality sort of rich that our system is becoming. Because there are other brands who do not care about improving. You know, there are a few brands they just create the NAS. That's NAS. That's it. I don't care. It stores data, but you're not adding any new extras, and that's it. But we're QNAP and Synology, they are taking it serious. Like they could take it more serious.
That reminds me of TerraMaster. There was a ransomware attack on that one. I think it was the very first week of this year when that was raised, and it kind of came to light just how easy the exploit actually was. Now, going back to a previous instance of when QNAP was attacked, the QLocker, I believe it was QLocker. Forgive me if I'm wrong there. You can tell me in the comments, but QNAP themselves volunteered that a backdoor access account, I think it was Hybrid Backup Sync 3 at that time, that had been further patched out over time, but unupdated systems still had that backdoor vulnerability on there. That to me is a failing by the brand. That in that scenario, that is a failing by the brand specifically, inarguably. Not the data lost because they didn't have a backup, because you should have had a backup to start with, because nothing's 100%. But that was a failing by QNAP. In this scenario, the failing by QNAP here, for me, is that, one, the presentation of a lot of the options that allow configuration and control are too easily accessible and not given enough weight in terms of the impact that they can have. And two, the way they have reacted to this and the way they've responded to their end user base has been weak at best. Because yes, it's a huge volume of people. Yes, it is Chinese New Year right now, but it's still not good enough, because this is something that I believe the ball started rolling on this in the teens of Jan, you know. If you go to the forums, there's actually a great analogy, though, just to flip things around. If you go into the QNAP support forum about this, people are angry, and there's a lot of people getting angry at each other, arguing in the post about backups and whether they should have a backup, what their expectations are from the brand. And someone was throwing around, if I have my bank card and someone gets into my bank account, steals a bunch of money, I expect my bank to refund that money, and they will refund that money. But the banks make it abundantly clear, as this was pointed out before, this isn't my own point, that it was, if you go to the bank and say, I left my bank card in the middle of a coffee shop with the PIN number attached to it, or I left it accessible next to a chip and pin, and I made it ultimately accessible, the bank may not be quite so forgiving about that. So it's a lot of it about the ports and where the responsibility of those end users lie there. Let's be realistic, this video has gone on for quite a while. We genuinely could talk about this for hours, and I'll be straight with you. We're probably going to talk about this after this video as well, because there's a few minor points there. But, Eddie, straight off, let us go back to the original question in the title for this video. Are QNAP NAS safe, in your opinion?
I think it is safe, because, in general, if I would buy a QNAP NAS now, and I would plug it to my router, no one would get to that NAS. There's no way. Only when I start setting things up and then following those easy wizards when they say, like, do you want to simplify things? Do you want to enable all these things? Are you home user? Are you remote user? Or this? Just click this button and you're going to make it so simple for you. From that point on, you start opening the doors. But from the moment when you just plug it into router, no one can get into your home network. So no one can see your NAS. No one can attack your NAS. Nothing can happen to your NAS.
But you're saying that as an IT professional, Are you saying that as someone that's already configured your firewall and your VPN there? Sorry to
I mean,
interrupt.
even at home, if you have done nothing with your router, because in your NAS, when you start enabling this UPnP and all port forwarding, all automated features what QNAP is offering, this is a tragic moment when that QNAP start talking to your router and saying like, okay, router, this door is safe, just open it up, let people in, because when you open these doors, then people come in, hackers come in, and then they, okay, now we are in, now we can start, stretch fingers and start, like, let's try brute force passwords, let's try scan all of the ports, let's scan, the usernames are available, we figured out, oh, there are some holes in that software, so let's like send some injections and stuff like that. So from that point, it's becoming dangerous. But if you're not clicking any simple like do it for me, then it's all in your hands how safe this NAS is going to be for you. And as long as you're not trusting anyone else to set up your NAS, then, or if you don't trust some professional to set up your NAS, it's not going to be safe.
So are you saying, though, that if you are going to... So these options, these configurations, these easy options, whatever you... Quick internet, whatever you want to call it. These are options that you should never use, or these are options that you should use, but also have a background in networking, in just the architecture of your router. You should know that, and then you can play with these settings. Or are you saying you should never touch those settings, period?
Yeah, you shouldn't touch anything what you don't know of. If someone is saying you're going to set it up for a like simplified way, don't trust them. Just like talk to your IT friend, because every family has some cousin who is in IT. Just ask them to come and have a look. Should I click this easy mode or not? Because as long as you're not doing that, your NAS is safe. There is no way someone's going to get in your NAS if you haven't enabled all of these extra features. It is safe.
I think for the most part, I think we're on the same page for the most part. I think I would still continue to recommend QNAP NAS. I do, and I probably will for the rest of the year at least. But at the same time, I think a lot of that remote access stuff, as you say, I would be inclined to only recommend remote access if you are going to have all those settings already on there, have the VPN server in place there, have a sophisticated router, and if you are going to have an ISP router, look into it as well, what its defaults are. I think I would still recommend QNAP remote access to those users that have that architecture. Other than that, I wouldn't recommend QNAP NAS to anyone that's going to be over-reliant on those defaults, because if you're going to rely on those defaults, as we've seen in the past, vulnerabilities can happen. And moreover, I would only recommend a NAS, and this isn't QNAP, but this is anyone, to people who can also accommodate a backup routine as well. Not a redundancy backup, not snapshots, not time managed backup, not time managed retention policies there, not RAID only. If you can't have a backup as well as the NAS, I don't think you should buy a NAS, because I think NAS is, I'm as guilty as anyone, it's being provided as an all-in-one solution when it should have these extra little bits and bobs strapped on the side there. And I think people pretending like it's still 1998, that's not going to work. Look at this year. In my article, I do detail, looking at my notes here, Acer, Gigabyte, A-Data, Capcom, Volvo, the sodding Salvation Army. All of these people got ransomware hit in the last 12 to 18 months. And by the way, that is a small, tiny crumb of the entire list of people that have been hit by it. I still recommend QNAP NASes, but at the same time, I think the sophistication and the skill set of a QNAP NAS buyer, it needs to be higher before they invest in it. As you highlight this actually quite well earlier in the video, if you don't know anything about network security and you don't want to play with your router, you might be better off with another brand, because this level of customization, this level of flexibility may be too much for you. If this isn't as unsophisticated as I own the key to the lock to the door of my front house. No one expects you to have the qualifications of a locksmith. In the case of a lot of these settings, I think people do, and I think QNAP NAS needs to address, one, how they present a lot of these flexible options, how they present updates to people and the necessity of those updates, I do think if you don't have the last solid update release, the system shouldn't be allowed to connect to the internet. I think that it shouldn't be allowed to connect to the internet if you don't have at least the most recent stable release. And I know that's not going to be a popular stance to take. I do still heavily recommend QNAP NAS for network and offline use. If you're going to have a closed network, I would say they are the best out there right now in terms of closed network utility. But that remote access there, that's kind of a sticky wicket for me. I mean, hopefully we never have to make another video like this again. My gut instinct kind of says otherwise. I hope that's not the case. And I also think it would be very remiss for us to not also say that other brands are targeted by ransomware. Other brands do get hit, not to this scale, but they do get hit. This isn't a QNAP only occurrence. It feels that way because there has to have been quite a lot of them in the last 18 months to 2 years. But check out those security advisory pages, everyone. One glance at that will show you the vulnerabilities that didn't make the mainstream news websites or even my own. The frequency of some of these minor intrusion attempts, codes being pucked straight in there, these things do exist, and the majority of them aren't system-wide. They are app-centric. They are dedicated to individual apps that have an online access component which can then be exploited. It gets patched, but people are always trying. But I think for now, I think we should wrap this video up, Eddie. We're probably not going to touch on the subject of Deadbolt again, unless there's a big development such as decryptor tools that don't require the key from Deadbolt to be paid for, to be utilized there. But again, maybe we'll revisit this subject regardless in 3 months to examine the state of play as new hardware arrives on the scene there. Eddie, have I missed anything today?
No, I think we covered everything.
Oh, that's nice to hear. I'm sure someone in the comments will tell us otherwise. But thank you so much for watching. Of course, there is the free advice section linked in the description, as always. So if you need help, me and Eddie the web guy pointed the right way. Great, he's over there. We are two humans. We can prove it. Look, I've got a face. And we try to answer every single one of them. We are humans. We've got lives. We've got jobs. We've got stuff we need to do. So it might take us a while or so, but it is a free advice service that gives free technical advice on how to set up your NAS, your network, and more. Take advantage of it if you're unsure about how to proceed on this. Click like if you've enjoyed the video, because arrogantly it's good to know what we're doing right, and click subscribe if you want to learn more. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to say goodbye now, and then Eddie's going to hopefully say goodbye to you as well. Otherwise that would be frightfully rude, wouldn't it? Cheerio.
Yeah.